Morning everyone, it's great to be with you, to share with you again this morning. Love does not delight in evil but rejoices in the truth. Love takes no pleasure in the sins of others but delights in the truth. Love does not rejoice in wrongdoings but rejoices in the truth. Love does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever truth wins out. All those are translations of today's verse from 1 Corinthians 13, verse 6. So today we are going to be thinking about how love responds, how love reacts to things not being right. Why does Paul even need to say that love doesn't rejoice in wrong or evil or sin or injustice? Surely that's obvious. Who would want to do that anyway? In my first job, I worked in a bank in London. I was working in the back office, and the manager of the back office was a man called Mr. Eagles. I lived in fear of getting something wrong because Mr. Eagles spotted everything. He lived up to his name. And he'd call you over to his desk and you'd just know that it wasn't going to be a pay rise he was going to discuss with you. You'd have got something wrong, made a mistake somewhere, and he was going to point that out to you. I was so glad when I was moved on to another branch. This week there's been all the goings on in Scotland over the dispute between Alex Salmond and Nicholas Sturgeon over the way evidence was handled in his recent trial. I can get so caught up in these things. Did he? Didn't he? Has she? Hasn't she? The kind of speculation, as if I was watching an episode of Line of Duty or something, instead of the actual thing being that these are real people and it matters what happens to them. The press is great for stirring up our interest in celebrities, people in the public arena, and especially so when things aren't going so well for them or when they slip up. And we can get so easily sucked into the drama. Think of the coverage of the Sussexes being stripped of their royal patronages recently. And last year's excessive interest in one man's trip from Barnard Castle to Durham, or was it the other way round, to test his eyesight. Newspapers depend on readers lapping up every juicy detail over other people's lives, almost wallowing and relishing their troubles. The German language has a word for this, or comes close to this, one that has made it into our language too. The word is Schadenfreude. The dictionary defines it as a feeling of pleasure or satisfaction when something bad happens to someone else. A feeling of pleasure or satisfaction when something bad happens to someone else. Not something to be proud of at all. We probably wouldn't want to admit to it, but at one time or another, we've very likely experienced a sense of Schadenfreude, an unhealthy, rather shameful interest and enjoyment of the downfall of someone else. Why is that? Why is that a human tendency anyway? Are we glad that someone else's life is going worse than ours? Does someone else's mess make our own problems feel more manageable, perhaps? How can I possibly feel smug over someone else's difficulties, knowing that someone else is having a hard time? That's appalling. Love does not behave like that. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. Love does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever truth wins out. So, if we are to be truly loving, what should our attitude be when things are not right? What should our attitude be to failings? Well, it seems pretty clear from this, whatever translation you choose, that we should be concerned about the truth, and that gloating over other people's misfortunes is just not on. Let's think about another passage from the Bible that might help us unpack this a little. It's from John's Gospel, chapter 8, starting at verse 2. At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," said Jesus. "Go now and leave your life of sin." It's the start of another day, and Jesus has gone early to the temple courts to teach, and as always, he's drawn a crowd. And then, not for the first time by any means, the Pharisees and others come and try and trap him. They try and put him on the spot. They interrupt his teaching, and instead of teacher, he's now being asked to be a judge. The accusers think they've got him this time. The law is very clear. It says in Deuteronomy, and it says it again in Leviticus, that the penalty for adultery is death. But do they really care about that? Or are they actually much more interested in trying to trap Jesus? I get the sense that they're enjoying a bit of schadenfreude as they wait to see what he does next, expecting him to be there, squirming like a worm on a fishhook. They're rejoicing in the wrongdoing because that's their means to accuse Jesus. They've got no interest in the truth. Because the truth of the situation is that, well, it takes two to commit adultery. So where's the other party? The truth is that this woman is not the only sinner in the temple courts that day. The truth is that Leviticus 20:10 clearly states that both parties are to be put to death, so why only the woman anyway? Jesus is love, and love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. And so Jesus makes the truth the focus. And he turns the tables. He's been asked to make a judgment, and yes, he does just that. He makes a judgment on them, not the woman. If any one of you is without sin, let them be the first to throw a stone at her. And of course, there's another truth in this passage, that there was actually one person there who was without sin, Jesus, and he chooses not to condemn. He chooses love instead. And so the Pharisees, well, they slope away. They've lost another round with Jesus. A moment of schadenfreude, enjoying the discomfort of both the woman and Jesus, has been denied them. And the way Jesus handles this whole situation seems to me to be a great illustration of how to live out 1 Corinthians 13 verse 6. Because the two parts of that verse, not rejoicing in the wrong but delighting in the truth, go together. We've got a negative, something to stop doing, and a positive, something to replace that negative with. Love delights in truth. The Greek word for truth is aletheia. Just as an aside, for those who like words and their meanings, if you've read or watched on TV Philip Pullman's series, his Dark Materials, the main character in that story, Lyra, has an instrument which enables her to know the truth. And that instrument is called an alethiometer, a measurer of truth. I wonder if one of those might be handy. Actually, I think it could be a bit scary to have that. But when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth and the life, he's using that word again, truth, aletheia. So perhaps as we think about today's verse, we should understand truth not so much in a judicial way, because truth isn't the opposite of wrong, but as a way to be, a way to live. What would that look like? Well, to go back to the examples we started with, rejoicing in the truth could mean holding back from joining in the criticisms, thinking very carefully about how we speak or what we might say or post on social media. Or we could even take it further and try and stop ourselves in mid-thought almost, to ask the question, is this the truth? Well, probably not, or at least not the whole truth. At best, what I know can only be partial. It's not the whole story. The Pharisees and the others who brought the woman to Jesus were totally fixated on the law. Their understanding of God was law-shaped. And they had problems with Jesus because in their eyes he didn't take the law seriously enough. In fact, they felt that he flouted it again and again by associating with people that they felt he shouldn't be with, by touching the unclean, by healing on the Sabbath. They've got quite a list of misdemeanours. The idea for them of God loving, not condemning this woman was anathema to them. And so, how do we think of God? Is my view, is your view of God more of a judge than as a one who deeply, deeply loves you? As one who doesn't focus so much on failings as on possibilities? Because the truth is that God forgives and does not condemn. The truth is that God looks on us with love and he delights in us. That's the truth that love delights in.